Fingerstyle Thursday. Hello, hello. So today we're here to talk about slides and grace notes, okay? So what is the difference between a normal slide and then a grace note? Now, very quickly, a grace note is basically a note that is played so quickly that usually musically it isn't counted. So you can't really count that. It's just a note into another note. That is a grace note. Whereas if I slid, I should play the note and then slide into the note. So you can clearly hear the definition between the two notes. I can hear first note, second note. Whereas a grace note, you're trying to highlight the note that you're sliding into, like that. Both have a different sound, both should be used differently. So we're going to basically play and see when we should use each one. Okay, so first of all, we want to really be confident about sliding and then versus like a grace note slide. Now, grace notes don't just apply to slides, they also apply to hammer-ons or pull-offs versus a normal hammer-on, grace note, where again, that first note you don't really hear. You should, on a normal hammer-on, be able to hear the two separate notes, whereas a grace note, the first note is much quicker, so it's not really counted. So, on a regular slide, if we just play the 5th fret on the first string, if we slide, basically, so use my index finger and play the 5th fret, and then slide up to the 7th fret. So, with a normal slide, you should be able to basically hear the first note, which is the 5th fret, and then you move and slide to the second note. You don't want to slide as you're playing, otherwise you end up with a grace note. So the grace note is basically where you slide as soon as you pluck. Normal slide, hear two separate notes. Grace note, you only really hear the note that you're sliding into, you don't really hear the first note. Now, on the piece of music, basically the grace note will be, it looks like a tiny little note. And technically on the tab, it also looks like a little note as well, okay? But to be honest, if you look at it from a distance, you can't really tell on the tab that it's actually any smaller. So in the music, it's more obvious because it appears as a tiny little note with like a normal hammer-on or slide icon into it. I will shout at you as to which notes are grace notes versus which ones aren't. And it's good, again, to practice the difference between the two. Let's go have a look at this lovely piece. It's all in C major, standard tuning, high G. Let's go have a look. Okay, so for this pattern, we need to start with our index finger on the 7th fret on the 2nd string. I'm going to pluck my 3rd string open, then I'm going to pluck my 2nd string, and then I'm going to hammer on to the 8th fret with my middle finger. So that's pluck 3rd, pluck 7, and then hammer on. Now these are all 16ths, so they all need to be even, 1, E, and. But actually it's a pattern of 3, 1, 2, 3, if that's easier for you to count. 1, 2, 3. Now, basically, the next we also have another pattern of 3, but this time you're going to pluck the open 4th, and then your index finger is going to be on the 7th fret on the top string, and you're going to pluck that and slide down to 5. So that is again 1, 2, 3. Or 16ths, 1 E and 2 E. 2 sets of 3. Now, after you do your initial hammer on, you have plenty of time to move your index finger over because basically you pluck, play, hammer, and then you have another open note. So by then you can already move your index finger without shifting your entire hand. Like that. So the last thing we're going to do is basically add just 4 and 2. And again, all these are 16th notes, 1 E and 2 E and But again, in my brain, I've divided it into a group of 3, 3 and 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And that's the main groove of the piece. So we just have to get really, really nice and confident with that. Hammer-ons and slides, not too fast. Okay, so because they're 16th notes, they only take up half the bar. So technically, after you play that little riff, 3, 4, you've got the space to count 3 E and 4 E and, which you can do, or you can just count 3, 4 if you're nice and confident with that. 3 E and 4 E and then we come to the next bar. Now the next bar starts off pretty much exactly the same. We have the same 2 groups of 3, but the next group of 2 incorporates a grace note, okay? And even though technically it looks like really I'm playing 3 notes, open, 5, 7, because the 5 is a grace note, it's in the space of 1 note. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So on the sheet, you'll see, if you look, it's really tiny 5, but that is your grace note. So if we count as 16ths, that will be 1 E and 2 E and A. And that whole slide, A, A. You pluck on the A, and then you sort of land on the 7, just slightly after. Again, grace notes, you don't musically count them, so you just count it as 1 note. So you can count that again as 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And then you've still got the gap of 3, 4 after it. So basically we're going to do this twice in a row. So we're going to play our original bar, 3, 4, second bar, go back to your first bar, which is the third bar, but you know, and then the same. And that's the main motif done. Okay, so bar 5, we actually have to move. So it's sort of based around an F shape here. But basically, I'd play your middle finger on the 5th fret on the 3rd string. And then, because we're going to hammer, I'd put your index on the 3rd fret, 2nd string. And then basically your ring finger is going to be hovering because it wants to hammer down on the 5th fret on the 2nd string. Okay, so it's exactly the same rhythm as what we've been doing. So we're going to pluck the 3rd string, pluck the 2nd string, and then hammer on down with that ring. So I'm playing 5, 3, 5, 5, 3, 5, which again is that group of 3. My next group, basically, I'm going to pluck that 4th string again, and then the hammer on is on the 1st string on the opened 3. Over to YouTube for the rest of the talk. So in order to move our fingers sort of efficiently there, after you've played that initial hammer on, that sort of open string again gives you a gap to move your fingers. So I'm going to play pluck, hammer, pluck, and then I've got rid of my ring finger and I just moved my index finger just hovering over that top string. There it is. And then basically those fingers don't have to move at all because I'm just going to pluck the 4th and 2nd strings open who are currently open in that position. So again, that's a pattern of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Or 16th notes, 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and. Again, take that one nice and slow. Next, we move down to a D minor-esque shape. Okay, so the middle finger doesn't actually leave the fretboard. We just move down to the 2nd fret, 3rd string. And again, because we're hammering on from opens, I'm going to use my index finger to hammer on the 2nd string, 1st fret. And then I use my pinky to hammer on the 3rd fret, 1st string. There's a lot of numbers. Yes, so I'm using those fingers. You can use your ring finger to hammer on for that 3rd fret on the A string, but I always find the pinky much more comfortable. Okay, so again, rhythmically same pattern. I'm going to pluck my third string, and then I'm going to pluck the second string, which should be open, and I'm going to hammer on to the first fret with my index. So pluck 3, pluck 2, hammer. And again, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so next we basically move back to that fourth string pluck, and then it's an open pluck on the first string, and then I'm going to hammer on the third fret. But like I said, I hammer on with my pinky. There we go. So we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now, the very last two notes, we have this grace note again. So it's the same thing. I'm going to pluck the fourth string, and then because I use my pinky, I'm going to slide that up to the fifth fret. And again with a grace note, I slide as soon as I pluck, so it sort of counts as 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And that's a D minor-esque pattern done. Right, practice that slowly. Okay, so the last 4 bars, they're pretty much basically the first motif, but rather than waiting, we're going to consistently descend down the C major scale instead. So we basically have to play the very first thing that we did, and then instead of waiting, because the 16th, 1 E and 2 E and we're going to go 3 E and 4 E and. This is going to be exactly the same sort of rhythm, but fingering is different. So I want to be 5th fret, 2nd string, and I'm going to hammer onto the 7th fret with my ring finger. Then I'm going to play the 4th string open again, and again my index is going to go over to the 5th fret this time, and slide down to the 3rd fret. And then I play 4, 2, open as normal. So if we put those two patterns together, there's actually very little breathing room between them, but I left 2 opens at the end of the riff as sort of breathing room, so then you can hopefully change. A little bit of breathing. That leads us to the 3rd riff. So again, we're pretty much in the right position. I just have to move my index finger to the 2nd string, 3rd fret, and I'm going to hammer on to the 5th fret on the 2nd string with my ring finger. Then I'm going to pluck the open 4, move index to 3, and slide down 1 fret to the 2nd. So if I play that, open 3rd, 3, 5, 3, 2. And again, I play the open 4, 2 at the end. After I've done that little pattern, I'm going to move back up to use the second pattern that we just used, where it was the 5, 7, and then slide down 5, 3. So in order, we start off where we originally started, 7, 8. Then we start with a hammer on the 5, 7. 5, 3, slide, hammer on 3, 5, slide on 3, 2, and then I go back up to the 5th fret, my index finger, and play that second pattern again. So if I put all those together, that's our rundown. The only difference on the last line is that basically when I get to the last one, I'm going to do a little bit of a pause, which I need to explain. So when it comes to the last line, it's pretty much exactly the same. I start off with my first little riff. I move to my next riff. Then when I get to the last riff, I'm basically going to finish it just on there. So the last 2 lines, I play the first riff, 5, 7, 3, 5, back to 5, 7, and then we repeat that, but you just finish on that 4-2 there. Woo. And there we go, okay? It's really important, hopefully, that you can see the importance of the difference how you slide grace notes or non-grace notes, okay? Take it slow, you'll smash it, be good. Love you, have a good week.